So, without further ado, I would like to welcome retired Montana Supreme Court Justice Mike Wheat here to moderate our debate. Mike has served our country as a Marine in Vietnam, received the Purple Heart for his service. He has a political science degree and law degrees, both from the University of Montana. We'll forgive that. He served as deputy county attorney in Butte before opening his Bozeman law firm of Koch, Wheat, and Kinsler. We have elected Mike to represent us in the Montana Senate and to serve on the Montana Supreme Court. This last year, Mike retired from the Montana Supreme Court, where he had served as a justice since 2010. Now that he has freed himself from the neutrality of the court, we are delighted that Mike is diving back into the political dialogue. We're lucky. We're the beneficiaries of that. Mike is a friend and an asset to Gallatin County Democrats, and we are grateful for your service to our community and state, for your willingness to leave the warmth of Arizona to join us here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Gallatin County's own Justice Mike Wheat.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And now we're on to the main event. That's what we're all here for. The procedure is going to be, I am going to introduce the candidates. There's only 4 candidates tonight, but I'm going to introduce them one by one. They submitted their bios, and we haven't made any change to those. And so what I'm reading is what they've submitted. So don't take it out on me, okay? When they come on, they'll come up, they'll sit in these chairs, and then once we've introduced all of them, we'll proceed with our questions. Before they get here, just to give you an idea of how the forum is going to operate, there's going to be 3 styles of questions tonight. There'll be 2 rounds of questions where the candidates will have 2 minutes to answer the question. There'll be 2 5-minute rounds of what we call rapid fire questions. These are questions designed to elicit either a yes or no or a one-word answer. And the second round of those questions will be written questions from the audience. They'll be handed to me, and I'll read the question just the way it was written by whoever submitted the question. And the final question will be to the candidate's opportunity to close the debate with a 3-minute answer. So with that in mind, let's start with the main event here. The first candidate is Grant Keir. Grant was originally trained as a scientist who worked as a well site geologist on natural gas rigs, and also as an engineering geophysicist evaluating critical infrastructure projects all across North America and Europe. He later went on to start a career in conservation as the executive director of 2 separate Montana land trusts in western Montana. He first worked at the Bitterroot Valley Land Trust, where he was tasked to pass a $10 million open space bond in Ravalli County, one of the most conservative counties in Montana. After working for a year and a half to build a coalition of farmers, ranchers, conservative county commissioners, and environmentalists, Ravalli County passed the open space bond and is still a successful program to this day. After working in the Bitterroot, Keir continued his career at 5 Valleys Land Trust in Missoula, where he worked to preserve viable agricultural land, open up access to public lands, and preserve critical wildlife habitat. He also played a key role in crafting the 2014 Farm Bill, making sure it worked for Montana farmers and ranchers. Grant has also worked as a volunteer firefighter, a victim's advocate at the Domestic Abuse Shelter, and served as the treasurer of the Missoula Economic Partnership. Grant is a proven bridge builder with experience working across the rural and urban divide and is focused on delivering results for Montana. Let's give Grant Keir a good round of welcome here in Bozeman. Our next candidate is Jared Pettinato. As the only candidate born and raised in Montana, Jared grew up in Whitefish, hiking in Montana's mountains, fishing in Montana's creeks, and swimming in Montana's lakes. Jared learned hard work from his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. They connected Montana to the United States by keeping the trains running. Jared's father fixed track and served as the secretary for the local union. Jared has earned his mathematics degree from that other school in Missoula. He earned his law degree from Stanford and clerked on the Montana Supreme Court. While there, the court struck down the school funding system and set the table for making Montana businesses non-smoking. Jared served at the United States Department of Justice, where he defended public lands for 9 years. He defended Forest Service projects on the Helena, the Lewis and Clark, the Gallatin, and the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forests. He defended the Forest Service's ability to drop fire retardant out of airplanes, and he advanced Senator Lee Metcalf's vision in the Montana Wilderness Study Act. Courts now use Jared's interpretation of that act. Separately, the United States trusted Jared with $16 billion of projects throughout the United States that include wind farms, highways, and public rails. He prevailed in about 15 million of them. In one, Jared defended a multi-billion-dollar subway in Beverly Hills. The plaintiffs spent over $5 million on experts and attorneys. They sent teams from Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. President Trump's personal lawyer, Mark Kasowitz, formed one of the New York firms. Jared defeated all of them to keep the subway construction moving. In 2017, he defeated a motion that would have cost the taxpayers up to $1.5 billion. Jared has spent 12 years writing a nonfiction book called Beyond Party, currently at 400 pages with 1,700 footnotes. Now we know what Jared does on Saturday night. It describes a balancing test to determine whether, for any particular public policy problem, the political left or the political right solution grows resources for filling citizens' needs. The balancing test turns circular political arguments into linear political arguments. Jared is seeking a publisher. Jared has already served in one U.S. constitutional position. For 2 years on a federal grand jury, he spent Wednesdays and Fridays deciding whether prosecutors established that a target probably committed a crime. Jared is currently running a small business, renting a house, practicing law, and running a nonprofit called Citizens for Constitutional Integrity. Let's give Jared a good round of applause. Next candidate is our very own Kathleen Williams. For over 3 decades, natural resource policy, conservation, and serving Montana has been Kathleen Williams' calling and her career. While representing Bozeman and Gallatin County in the Montana legislature for 3 years, she served as vice chair of both the Agriculture Committee and the Taxation Committee. She was a lead negotiator on the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Water Compact, advanced the state earned income tax credit, and fought hard for non-discrimination and a woman's right to choose. Kathleen's strong stand on health care issues is rooted in her childhood. Her mother, Marie, was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease when Kathleen was 11. She and her father became Marie's primary caregivers for the next 8 years. Kathleen knows firsthand how a single health problem can change a family. In the legislature, she fought tough battles to expand access to health care. She stood up to insurance companies and required them to cover routine care for cancer patients participating in clinical trials. She was a strong advocate for individuals who were paying too much in the individual market. She voted to expand Medicare to 91,000 Montanans. Kathleen has a record of courage, the type of courage it takes to stand up to special interests and lobbyists and to do what's right for her fellow Montanans. Her career of public service has always been grounded in our hopes, struggles, and dreams. Kathleen enjoys spending time in the open spaces she has worked so hard to protect. When she has free time, you can find her hunting, fishing, skiing, and mountain biking with her dog Danny, or visiting her stepsons, is it Kalen? And Sander. To quote Dorothy Bradley, Kathleen is, quote, a former legislator whose dignity to the core and as seriously informed as anyone I know. Let's give a warm welcome to Kathleen Williams. Our final candidate is John Heenan. John has served for more than 15 years as a consumer protection advocate and attorney for clients throughout Montana. He has won hundreds of cases on behalf of people and families who have lost their home to illegal foreclosures, been taken advantage of by payday loan companies, or bullied by big banks and insurance companies. He has represented everyone in this room when he volunteered his time to prosecute politicians who took corporate dark money, including Art Wittich. John's work in these cases is featured in the film Dark Money. John and his wife, Megan, are owners and operators of a restaurant in Billings with 13 employees. John and Megan have 4 children attending and thriving in Montana's public schools. John's mission is to stand up to corporate bullies and fight for all the people of Montana, to protect Medicare, Social Security, public education, and access to public lands and waterways from Greg Gianforte and others seeking to undermine our Montana way of life. Let's give John a warm welcome. Candidates, are you ready to get this show on the road? Show dancers, yes. Actually, we're going to start with the 2-minute questions. And then, so we'll first do 2-minute answer questions, and then we'll go to the rapid fire, and then we'll go to 3-minute questions, and then some more rapid fire, and then you'll close it out, okay? So this first question, and we'll start with you, Grant. And the way we'll do this is you can start, and then on the next question, Jared will start, and we'll keep rotating that way. So here's the first question. Last week, a 19-year-old killed 17 students and teachers in a Florida high school. Student protesters around the country are asking for change. Grassroots organizations like Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America are effectively fighting the NRA. We need more. We are looking to our leaders to choose action. In Missoula's forum, you did not support expanding background checks. If expanded background checks are not the legislative answer, what specific action will you take in the U.S. House, if you are elected, to solve our gun violence problem?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for starting with, I think, what's probably foremost on people's minds right now. Obviously, this has been a hard week for all of us, a really important topic for all of us to consider, and I think as Democrats, ones that many of us who are gun owners like me wrestle with. And I did state in that meeting that I was not against expanded background checks. I think the topic of that question was really focused on domestic violence. Look, I'm going to be really honest. I didn't get into this race to take guns away from Montanans who are law-abiding citizens. I got into this race because I think we have somebody running who's not making good decisions. And so I didn't have a lot of background going into this on an issue, and I've certainly done a lot of homework since, including calling some experts in this in Montana. There are really important background checks changes that we can make immediately. There's no question in my mind that Congress is the body in this nation that is elected to make quick changes and responsive changes. We've got to close background check loopholes, And we've got to have an integrated and fully working system across the country. Examples of those loopholes that we need to close. I think we need to change the background check loophole for gun shows. That's one example. I also think we need to make sure that the system works so that when more people are added, it is not a false sense of security. Right now, our Department of Defense, for example, doesn't report crimes that should be in the background check system, and it has no system in place to change that. We can change that. We also have to repeal the Dickey Amendment now. As a scientist, I feel absolutely irate that we don't have enough data and information to make good decisions on one of the most emotional issues that we face as a country in Montana and as people who care about protecting rights and protecting human beings and protecting our kids. Last but not least, we need to break down the stigma around mental health care. This is not about blaming people for being mentally ill. This is about recognizing that in Montana, the issue of gun violence, the issue of gun deaths is primarily around suicides. We've got to work to expand and break down the stigma around mental health care and make sure that there are programs in place for people to deal with issues of dependency.
Thank you. Jared?
The Parkland shootings broke my heart, and watching those kids and watching what they went through just hits me. And we're not doing enough. We need to do more. If that keeps happening, we just need to do more and find some way to cut back on this, to stop these tragedies, these massacres. We've got a few different avenues we can take. One is, as Grant was talking about, doing studies. Right now, Congress has prohibited the Center for Disease Control from studying gun violence, from figuring out what would be the most effective route to take so that we can figure out a good, common sense way of addressing these problems. We need to enforce the laws that we have. We need to pay for the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They don't always have the leadership that they need, and Congress undermines their funding and undermines their efforts to try to do what the laws already allow them to do. So we need to make sure we do that. And then we need to stop pulling back on the gun laws that we have. Last year, Congress withdrew regulation that would have stopped people with substantial mental handicaps from obtaining guns. And so that's going in the wrong direction. When it comes down to this, for me, it's balancing freedoms. The freedom to own a gun, the freedom to hunt, and the freedom to live on the land. My grandfather fed his family with hunting up in Whitefish. So it's personal to me. So we need to balance those freedoms with the freedom for school children to be able to go to school and not fear somebody coming in and attacking them, and teachers, and these are our children. So we need to find a good, solid, sensible balance. And I think I've given you 3 ideas. I'm open to more. I'm looking at this, and I hope we can do more together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Kathleen?
Every child deserves to feel safe in school, and every parent deserves to have their child come home from school safe. I am a sportsman. I'm a gun owner. My family, we have multiple rifles and shotguns. We have never felt the need to have an AR-15. These are appropriately named assault weapons. They're not for self-defense. And 4 courts have declined to say that the Second Amendment covers assault weapons. Thank you. We need to increase our restrictions on assault weapons so that they can only be used in controlled environments, just like machine guns are at this point. We need to ban bump stocks. We need to ensure that the NICS system works and that states are reporting to it. We do need to expand mental health and remove the stigma, but we don't want to blame all of this on mental health. So again, I'm a sportsman. I support sportswoman, actually. I support the Second Amendment. I support a strong new generation of sportsmen and women in Montana. Our hunter education system is incredible. We need a new generation of sportsmen and hunters. And my family has participated in youth hunter programs. And we definitely have a sportsman's culture here in Montana. And me as a gun owner, as a woman, as a Montanan, I hope to be a strong voice in Congress, and I'm not afraid to stand up to the NRA.
Thank you, Kathleen. John?
So as Justice Wheat mentioned, I have 4 children in public school. My oldest, Molly, attends West High there in Billings, and somebody pulled a fire alarm last week, right after the Parkland shooting, which is what happened there in Parkland. And my daughter said, "Dad, you need to understand that my entire life of going to school, my entire life has been under the threat of gun violence. And when that fire alarm got pulled, I thought we're the next ones to be under attack. And so did my fellow classmates. How long ago was Las Vegas? And we still can't ban bump stocks. And we have a president that tells us, wait, he's got a solution, we're gonna arm up teachers. Are you serious? Are you serious? Well, why can't anything get done? How come common sense can't go to Washington, D.C.? I'll tell you why. Because Washington is broken. It's corrupt. It's run by lobbyists and wealthy donors and corporate special interests. And that includes the NRA. And so we have a representative now that after Las Vegas, he didn't even, like the others, say thoughts and prayers. And he certainly won't make any decision that comes to common sense with respect to safety of our children unless the NRA gives him a pass, because he's taken $345,000 from them. He's a top 5 all-time recipient of NRA money. So to me, what Montanans deserve is someone that's going to go represent them, not the NRA, not the gun lobbyists. And so I won't take $1 of NRA money. I will not, thank you. I will not fill out their questionnaire. I will not take any money from corporate PACs or corporate lobbyists, because it's important to me that we all deserve, my children deserve, your children deserve, somebody that's going to go to Washington, D.C. and not have the strings attached that our representative has now, and be able to sit down and say, let's talk about common sense. And so I've set forth things that I think are common sense. Banning bump stocks, that's just so easy. Closing loopholes that, you know, they're cheats, right? They're cheats around the system. So the gun show loophole, let's close it. And let's get rid of politicians that are unwilling to come to the table. As your representative, I will come to the table. Everything's on the table. Let's do the studies, let's find out. But in the meantime, let's protect our children. And let's find common sense solutions. And I mean, there's all kinds of common sense solutions. We just need representatives that are willing to go work for us and do it. And I promise you, if you give me the honor of representing you, that's all I'll do all day long, is represent you, not lobbyists. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I want to remind the candidates that we have time limits here, and so you have to pay attention to those now so that nobody is cheating anybody else on the time issue. All right, the next question here is, and we're going to start with Jared. The world's richest 1% has seen their share of the world's wealth grow from 42.5% in 2008 to over 50% in 2017. What 2 steps can the U.S. House take to address income inequality and wealth disparity in the United States?
Raise minimum wage and expand unions. The number of unions in America has gone from about 40% in the 60s to about 6.5% today. It just makes my heart bleed. The people today don't have enough money. We just don't have enough money. We're squeezed in every direction. We're squeezed by healthcare. We're squeezed by childcare. We're squeezed by increasing costs in every direction, and our wages are just not keeping up. And there are only a few ways to do that. You can do it with increasing the minimum wage, unions, and trying to increase demand for jobs. And we need to do all of those things. We need to expand the minimum, we need to get people better jobs, get people jobs that allow them to compete against corporations. Because right now, corporations already have a collective for the shareholders. It's called the corporation. And so the workers deserve a collective as well to negotiate on their behalf. Until we get to that point, the corporations can divide and conquer the workers. Everybody who works will compete against each other for the lowest possible wage. And that's what we see happening. So until we can get the workers together and until we can increase minimum wage, we're going to see inequality continue to increase. Because when it comes down to it, workers only have one thing. They have their time. And it's a different system that we live in when we're trading our time. So that's how I want to do it. That's how we can decrease inequality and bring America into the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jared. Kathleen?
Thank you. We watched that tax bill go through with no hearings, 1,000 pages. Not sure anyone knew what was all in it. I think one thing we need to do is reverse those tax cuts on the wealthy. One corporation just made $29 billion out of that tax cut policy. That's not helping Montanans. That's not helping America. That's increasing income disparity. The second thing is to fix our healthcare system. The group that's falling into poverty the fastest is those over 65. So we need to ensure that those safety nets, Social Security, Medicare are strong, and the reason they're falling into poverty is healthcare costs. So we are seeing income disparity increasing. When I was vice chair of the taxation committee at the Montana legislature, one thing I was especially proud of is reactivating the earned income tax credit proposal, which did pass in this 2017 legislature. We started it again in 2015. That's a great program. So I was proud to be part of that. I will work hard for the fact that as a vice chair of the taxation committee, I was one of the first people to stand up on the House floor and talk about income disparity, growing income disparity in Montana. And we worked on tax policy that would address that, working on the taxes that were most regressive rather than progressive. And I think we need to send someone to Congress that has that background, that can hit the ground running on incomes, on tax policy, and on how to improve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. John?
Yeah, we go back to, we've got a broken Washington. We've got a Congress that doesn't represent us. We've got a Congress and a congressman that represents a champion, right? He's a champion of billionaires, of corporations, of lobbyists. They all have a champion in Greg Gianforte. What Montana needs is somebody that's going to be a champion for everybody else. And so what's the biggest problem? Those are all problems. Unions, which I support the hell out of unions. I support a living wage. I believe as I travel the state, people don't want handouts. They want to be paid fairly. They want to be paid enough to put food on the table and provide for their families. And they're not getting that. because we're subsidizing corporations that are underpaying their employees. But the root of all that, is Citizens United. It's a system where it's pay to play, and our representatives aren't representing us. They're making decisions based on what their wealthy donors tell them to do. And so overturning Citizens United is the thing that's going to break free and allow our representatives to actually do what we send them to Washington to do, which is to represent us, not them. So how do we fix it? We don't elect people that are taking corporate PAC money. Our representative pledged he wouldn't take corporate PAC money. He's taken $53,000 of corporate PAC money since I got into this race. We don't elect people that are going to take money from healthcare executives, tobacco lobbyists, people that write checks with expectations, because then they have strings attached. We deserve representatives that won't have strings attached. And when we elect people like that, then they can go do the job that we send them there to do, which is to represent us. And then they can pass great laws like Medicare for All and a living wage and fund public education, all the things that would make our society and our country and our economy work again.
Thank you, John. All right, our next question, Kathleen, you will start. What? Oh. I apologize. I'm sorry. Grant.
Thank you. So why did I just initiate the applause for my own opponent in the room? Because I couldn't agree more on the issue of Citizens United. It is the root of so many of the problems that we will talk about tonight. And I think we need people elected to office who understand everyday Montanan issues, who don't come from exorbitant wealth, who have understood the struggles of everyday people. And I think that we do not have that in the person representing us right now. And I think until we change the way that our elections are funded, we will not see people in Congress across our country who represent the real people who are struggling every day and the people for whom all of our policies must work. I also think that our labor unions are under attack. We have got to protect the right of people to organize. It's absolutely essential. You know, so many of the issues, we're talking about assault weapons tonight. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about sexual assault in the workplace, right? We need champions for workers in the workplace, especially in our biggest corporations. And it's essential that we give people an opportunity and a right to organize so that they have somebody advocating on their behalf for wages, for a safe and healthy workplace, and making sure that people have those opportunities when they come into work to work a hard day, leave with a fair paycheck, and when they go home at night, be able to take care of their families. Those are two things that Congress can do right now.
Thank you, Grant. And again, I apologize for our next question. Then, Kathleen, you will get to start off. President Eisenhower warned against the military-industrial complex. But in 2017, the United States has 200,000 troops in 177 countries, and the annual defense spending exceeded that of the next 7 countries combined. How will you balance defense spending with our domestic spending needs, such as Social Security and Medicare, while also considering the deficit?
So I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran, the wife of a Vietnam-era veteran. My husband went to Iraq in 2009 for 17 months to help them rebuild their agricultural sector. Same time I went to the legislature, and we would Skype every Wednesday night at 8:30 and talk about our shared experiences trying to solve problems, one in the Middle East and one in Helena. So one of my campaign priorities that has been a priority from the start is our place in the world, rebuilding our place in the world. It's been amazing watching a year of this administration and how they have decimated some of both our our ability to feel safe from foreign powers, and the stability of the world. And we need to reverse that. We need Congress. Congress needs to reassert its role in foreign policy. They have abdicated that, and it needs to change. As far as the budget goes, I was on the road during the budget considerations where the defense spending increases. I didn't hear any justification for those. So we can't just increase defense budget because it seems patriotic. We need to, and we can't do it just because someone wants a new aircraft carrier built in their district. So we need to scrutinize our defense spending. We need to ensure that it's going to build safety in the world and safety at home, and that it treats our military personnel fairly and equitably. And what really is going to save defense spending is peace.
Thank you, Kathleen. John?
Yeah, beware the military-industrial complex. And, we just come back to, hey, how come we're spending all these billions and billions and billions of dollars overseas on military spending while we watch our roads and our schools and our infrastructure crumble? How come we're not investing in our future, in our country? And again, it's because we have representatives that aren't representing us. They're representing lobbyists and corporate special interests and corporations that can write big checks. And if you want to know about and look at corporations that can write big checks to buy Washington, D.C. and buy representatives, look no further than the military-industrial complex. They've got a stranglehold on Washington, D.C. Politicians on both parties take the contributions, and they always vote to increase defense spending. And of course, that's important. We need to have a strong security, obviously, but money is literally getting flushed down the toilets while these guys line their pockets. And that needs to stop. We need, again, people that are willing to go with no strings attached, not take that dirty corporate money so that they can make just good common sense decisions. And I'll tell you the worst thing, our government says, thank you for your service, thank you for your service, thank you for your service. But what do they do with veterans? As I travel the state and I talk to veterans, I hear horror stories about the inability to get access to health care, just this absolute not being treated the way that they deserve to be treated. And so we deserve representatives that will reprioritize and honor our veterans, that were willing to serve and fight for us and defend us, and prioritize making America work the way it has by investing in our future, investing in our infrastructure here.
Thank you, John. Grant?
So before I started this campaign, I sat down and talked to a lot of the folks who have influenced me in my life, especially in Montana. And I was sitting down talking to an old rancher, Republican, really proud of his son being in the military, a patriot, and absolutely committed to being fiscally conservative. And he said to me, you've got to work on military spending. His son is an engineer. In his work as an engineer, he identified a part on a helicopter for the Army or whatever service branch, and went to his superiors and said, we could save $1 million per helicopter if we just change the way we design this part. And the response was, you know what, that's a rounding error. There's no excuse for a rounding error. We can make our country safe and not waste vast amounts of money doing it. I think one of the things we have to do is recognize that the Department of State is where we need to be investing. We talked about peace. Diplomacy is what will save us money in the end on military spending. I think in Congress we should try to tie any increases in military spending to commensurate increases in the State Department so that we know we will have a stronger diplomatic corps, we will build stronger relationships, we will understand issues in communities, and we will avoid getting into wars. We will avoid getting into situations that require more funding for the military. That's how we do things in Montana, right? When we don't agree with someone, we go over and we sit down and we talk to them and we figure it out. That's the way the world works. If you've traveled on the world, you know that people want to sit down and understand each other. Our diplomatic corps has been incredible since the Second World War. It's the place that we are seeing drastic cuts. We are seeing philosophical changes where we are at an absolute crisis point if we don't turn our country around and reinvest in the State Department and make sure that we are building the relationships that save us money over time.
Thank you, Grant. Jared?
Montanans volunteer for the military more than people in any other state. We know our duty to the United States. We know our duty to contribute our time and our resources and our lives. And I support our troops in what they do. But we're sending them on missions that we're not so sure are the right ones anymore. Congress right now, well, the administration right now is running these wars around the world based on authorizations that Congress gave them in 2001, in 2002, to fight terrorists, to respond to September 11th. And we're still fighting wars based upon those. Congress has not revisited those authorizations, and the administration has used them to expand their mission. Mission creep has expanded into Syria, it's expanded across Iraq, and it's expanded into Nigeria. I don't think there's one congressperson or senator who voted for those defense authorizations back in 2001 and 2002 that thought, oh, of course we're gonna use these and then go to Nigeria. That's not how they designed it. So Congress has abdicated its responsibility to oversee our military and to oversee where our troops are going, because our troops go where we send them, and I appreciate them doing that, but we gotta make sure that we figure out where to send them and that Congress gets involved in that and that we make a good decision. And then we can make our military more efficient. We can make the Department of Defense more efficient. They've never had an audit from an external source that has looked for ways to make it more efficient. They just had one a couple of years ago that just started and just scratched the surface, and they could save $100 billion. What could we do with $100 billion? How much health care could we have? What kind of bridges could we build? So we've got places to squeeze efficiency. We've got to make sure that we are targeting on the right thing, and we've got to make sure that we protect and honor our troops. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. All right, candidates, we're now going to move into the rapid fire part of this. If you'd like to. And we'll start with John. Do you believe that the United States should pull out of the Paris Climate Accord?
No.
Grant?
No.
No.
Hell no.
All right, Grant, we're back to you then. Who are you most excited to meet when you go to Washington, D.C.?
I think Barack Obama's still living in town.
Jared?
I am looking forward to meeting some more Montanans when I go back to D.C.
I'd say Joe Biden. I hope he's still in town. He'll be here, actually.
John?
Yeah, I'm with Jared. I'd like to see some Montanans and maybe a Philadelphia Eagles football team if they come into town to collect their Super Bowl.
All right. Jared, do you support diverting public funds away from our public schools for any reason?
Never.
Kathleen?
No.
John?
Yeah, no.
Grant?
Hell no.
All right. Kathleen? It's you this time, isn't it, Kathleen? I'm losing track here. Do you support a $15 an hour federal minimum wage?
I support a federal living wage.
John?
Yes.
Grant?
No.
Jared?
Living wage, definitely.
All right. John, do you support safeguarding student loan forgiveness programs such as those for working in public service and in rural areas?
Absolutely.
Grant?
Yes.
Jared?
Definitely.
Yes.
Okay. Grant, do you support a carbon emissions tax?
Yes.
Jared?
Maybe.
Kathleen?
We're looking at it.
Maybe.
Jared, do you support imposing a transaction fee on Wall Street trades to discourage high-frequency trades?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, and we need to work on the computer trades, actually.
John?
Yes. Robin Hood tax.
Grant?
Yes.
Who's next here? Kathleen. Kathleen, do you support laws that create publicly financed campaigns?
Yes.
John?
Absolutely.
Grant?
Eventually.
Definitely.
Okay. Last one here. Back to you, John. Do you support the legalization of recreational marijuana?
I support the decriminalization of marijuana on the federal level. I've written an op-ed on this.
I'll take that as a no.
Well, it's not. It's not a no. It's a definite maybe.
Grant?
I support states' rights.
Leave it to the states.
Kathleen?
I support medicinal use and declassification or reclassification.
All right. Thank you all for that. Now we're going to move into another 2-minute round here. Okay? And we're going to start with you, John. You ready?
Yeah, just so everybody knows, that little hot seat round was quite hot from where I was sitting.
That's what we wanted it to be.
It's this seat is warm. I'm gonna jump up already.
All right. Democrats seek to expand access to quality health care for Americans, with many proposals from fixing the Affordable Care Act to Medicare for All. What specific health care policy do you support, and how will you get it passed in the U.S. House?
So everyone understands what I do for my job is to sit across the table from people that are having their wages garnished or have a stack of medical bills that they can't pay because they have cancer and so they can't work because they have cancer. Or I fight with insurance companies that won't pay claims that they ought to pay. And so what I see is a broken healthcare system. It's inefficient. It's incredibly inefficient. Using private insurance companies, it costs us 6 times the administrative costs of relying on a Medicare system. There's just so much waste. And why do we have so much waste? Why are we the only industrialized country that doesn't have a single payer system? The answer is corruption. The answer is, the answer is politicians that are more concerned about acting in the interests of health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies than they are in providing us with quality, affordable health care. So the ACA got us far, and a lot of people got insurance that didn't have it before the ACA, but let's be real. The ACA was written by health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies on behalf of health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. So I support Medicare for all, and thank you. And my clients don't have time to wait, and and the people of Montana and America don't have time to wait. The time is now, and again, what we deserve is representatives that will represent us and look at our best interest, not the best interest of the pharmaceutical companies that are writing the donations, the health insurance executives that are cutting the big checks to the politicians so that they have strings attached. And so, as your representative, no strings attached, let's get to work on implementing Medicare for all right now, and let's focus on fixing this broken healthcare system, not padding the pockets of insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies.
Thank you, John. Grant?
So I was raised by a single mom who is a nurse. If she hadn't worked at the clinic she worked at our entire lives, we would not have had access to care as small children. And I'm quite certain, given two young brothers growing up together, beating each other up often and playing outside, she would have been bankrupt. I'm not kidding. She would have been bankrupt. And our lives would have been very different today. I think we absolutely have to get universal coverage at an affordable rate to people as fast as possible. I do not believe that Bernie Sanders' plan does that trick. I want to get to work the day I'm elected, building partnerships, and I want to get to work the minute I get into DC to make sure that we have more transparent pricing for people, that we offer a public option on exchanges where there's limited competition like places like Montana, and that we get to work before we expand the Medicare system fixing it so that it doesn't turn into the military-industrial complex where we don't know where our money is going. What's really broken with healthcare right now, 65% of the costs that we pay compared to other developed countries are about the way that we charge for services. We've got to change, and the Affordable Care Act made progress towards this. We've got to change the way that we incentivize care providers so they are keeping people healthy. We can do that without completely blowing up the system, and we can do that in a way that gets people care faster, and we can get people the quality care they deserve immediately if we can make those changes and empower them to have more transparent choices with who is providing their services. We don't need to blow the system up to do that, and then we can evolve and migrate. A new proposal has just come out in the last couple of days called Medicare Extra. It sounds a lot like what my team has been thinking about and developing with a lot of people we've been talking about. I haven't had a chance to look at it in detail, and I don't know if I support that. But that, I think, offers some insights into how we can do this in a quicker way to get more people care immediately.
Thank you, Grant. Jared?
Don't all Americans deserve access to affordable health care? Yes, yes. And we got to make it happen. We got to do it. We got to get people there. We've seen things go in the wrong direction. Premiums are going up. Prescription drug prices are going up. Access and insurance is going down. I am skeptical of trusting the government with all of my health care. I don't trust this government, definitely not with all of my health care, because they've worked right now to undermine the system that we have. And if they had even more control and more opportunity, they could do even more and even worse things than they are already doing to undermine the Affordable Care Act. So I want to see us work on the system that we've got and not upend it and start all over again. It has opportunities to modify it. I see a couple in particular. I see one in prescription drugs, and I see one in expanding coverage. I want to pay people to enroll in the Affordable Care Act, to get on the exchange. We'll give you $100, we'll give you $200. It's a pain to do all of the work. I know, I'm on the exchange. And you gotta go look up this and find that and put all this stuff together. And I think if we paid people, we get more in the system. It helps push down on rates by spreading the risks more broadly. And we can work on prescription drugs. I was on the buses with Brian Schweitzer back in 2000 when we were taking buses to Canada to bring back cheaper prescription drugs. I was there, and I've been thinking about this a long time. We have market failure. One of the reasons we don't have a real market for prescription drugs because nobody wants to re-import the drugs that once they leave, and that's what the politicians say, oh, we can't re-import. We don't know if they're safe. We don't need to move the drugs around. They're here in America. We just need to set the prices and solve the market failure by saying, look, we're not going to charge more in America. You're not going to charge more in America, pharmaceutical companies, than they charge in other developed nations. We're going to solve the market failure. We're going to do it, and it'll bring prescription drug prices down, and we can tinker the system and put pressure to reduce costs and expand access.
Thank you, Jared. Kathleen?
So everyone deserves affordable, quality, accessible health care. As I talk to Montanans around the state, health care is often their top priority. We have people on the individual market that are paying tens of thousands of dollars in premiums and potential co-pays before they would ever see any service. And that is bankruptcy potential. That is a broken system. So our campaign has put out a fairly specific approach to fixing healthcare at the federal level. One, We need to ensure that we are stabilizing the individual market. We're reducing those costs through both purchaser subsidies that were supposed to come through with the ACA and the payments to the insurance companies that were supposed to come through with the ACA. We need to allow Medicare to bargain for drug prices, just like the VA and Medicaid can. We need to ensure that CHIP and the Rural Health Center funds are funded permanently, not just kicked down the road. And we need to have a national dialogue on not having a pendulum just swinging back and forth with repeal, replace, repeal, replace. We need to have a national dialogue about how we fix our system once and for all. And my proposal is to allow, to foster that dialogue, is to allow people 55 and older to buy into Medicare. And we'll use that group to both lower the costs in Medicare, lower the costs in the individual market, and use them and their stories, which they will love Medicare, I'm sure, to further explore this broader public option single payer. The Sanders bill is a 4-year time frame. The CAP proposal is an 8-year time frame. We need some steps that will really foster that dialogue and that solution. So 55 and older buying in is great. I've worked on these issues in the legislature, had great success on healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. All right, you're going to be up this time, Grant. I didn't forget you, okay? The next question here. Federal investment in infrastructure fosters job growth, improves transportation, and expands communication, healthcare, and education. Infrastructure investments can also increase use of clean, renewable energy, which in turn cuts planet warming, carbon emissions, cleans the air, and creates jobs. What infrastructure investments do you see benefiting Montana?
Thank you. So I worked in engineering geophysics for a couple of years in North America and throughout Europe. I watched other countries investing in infrastructure, testing, investing, redeveloping, rebuilding, state after state, country after country, community after country. Our country is falling behind the rest of the world. The places that we can invest right now are roads, bridges, broadband infrastructure for our rural communities. Those are absolutely essential so that our communities can be safe, so that we have fundamental infrastructure to drive our economies. We can continue to invest in building infrastructure in our educational facilities. That's absolutely essential to make sure that our kids have the best and most up-to-date and technologically advanced facilities to learn in. Those are all critical places. In terms of energy infrastructure, we have the capacity to deliver energy right now to the West Coast. They want different forms of energy. In order for us to transition and deliver that energy safely, we've got to invest in new power line and delivery systems that are safer and can handle new forms of energy. That will allow us to deliver the energy that markets are demanding from us. That will allow us to transition and ensure that great paying jobs in Montana can continue, they will be safe, and they will last for generations.
Thank you, Grant. Jared?
I defended $16 billion of infrastructure. I know how important it is. I defended wind farms and highways and public rail that expanded access, expanded mobility, expanded clean energy. So I'm running on the wind and the trees. It's making money out of thin air, and it's using the money that grows on trees to manage forests to reduce high-severity wildfires. Wind energy is the next treasure from the treasure state. We can put wind farms near the rural areas where it brings the best paying jobs in town, it rents land from the landowners, and it brings money, tax money, for our schools and for the state. This is Montana's next move, and we need to get on top of it because we have an opportunity here. And if we invest in Montana, that's how we're gonna move forward. There are new transmission lines, electricity transmission lines that move that energy at half to a third of the losses as conventional technology. We can use that to compete with energy sources, renewable energy sources, closer to Seattle and Portland. Seattle and Oregon, Washington, Oregon, they have renewable energy targets. They have demand, we have supply. It's a match made in heaven. And we can build Montana, we can move it forward, we can bring jobs and help our rural communities. We can put them by the reservations and expand everything. That's what I want to do.
Thank you, Jared. Kathleen?
This is a question we can probably all build on each other. I concur with roads, bridges, energy infrastructure, and I'll use the past answers to just add a few. One is I have, with a master's in recreation, I have always thought that recreational facilities are part of infrastructure and should be considered that way. Trails, bicycle lanes, all those things that can contribute to our quality of life, and also tourism and bicycle transportation throughout Montana. So we have real opportunities to enhance that kind of activity. We also need, I concur with the broadband, especially infrastructure that helps our rural communities, and broadband is one of those that we really need to think about Montana, not just as our cities, but our rural communities and our big open spaces. I just had one go out of my head. Schools, definitely schools have been mentioned. Energy storage. I think renewable energy is just so absolutely key. We have all kinds of opportunities here with wind and solar, and with the transmission, we need firming infrastructure. So whether it's pump storage projects, or I just met yesterday with this incredible new technology battery storage company up in the Columbia Falls area, and I think that's a real opportunity for Montana and infrastructure. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathleen. John?
You know, candidate Trump campaigned on $1 trillion of infrastructure spending, which frankly sounded really wonderful to me, amazing to me. And yet what we see instead is over $1 trillion handed out to corporations and billionaires that already have lots of money through tax cut bill. And now what we see is a tax on Social Security and Medicare and all the things, the programs that we hold dear, and no mention of how we grow our crumbling economy, our crumbling infrastructure. And that's again because those that are making the decisions are making decisions based on what's in their best interests. And those that are making the decisions are the ultra rich or corporations, or those that are more concerned, the Koch brothers and their gang, are more concerned about putting more money in their own pockets than the health and well-being of this nation. And so all the things that my friends here mentioned, let's rebuild our schools, let's rebuild our roads. There's an opportunity to do a civilian conservation corps like we used to have, where we put people to work in good paying jobs in Montana, rebuilding our communities, in particular our rural communities. We all benefit from that. That's the way to grow the economy the right way. Our college here at MSU, even if your child doesn't go to MSU, this is such the right way to grow an economy, by investing in our university systems, investing in our children, investing in our future. So let's make that happen. Let's make that happen.
Thank you, John. Okay, we're coming to the last 2-minute question, and we'll start with you, Jared. The Women's March has become a movement, with 1,500 marching in Bozeman this year. It is up to our leaders to turn these voices into policy and law. Universal pre-care education, safeguarding access to reproductive health care, and paid leave for childbirth are examples of policies the U.S. House could implement. What policies do you support that reflects the voices of the Women's March?
Kathleen, you want to take this one first? I listen. When it comes to these issues, I like to listen because I don't always know the right way, and I'm, turns out, not a woman. So I like to listen and hear what's on people's minds to make sure that I go in the right direction, and that we do adopt the right policies that move everyone forward. I marched in both women's marches. I had a great time. I'm glad to see the energy and people coming out and supporting these issues, because these are all of our issues. And they arise a lot because I call it wealth, it's resource extraction. Whenever you have a less powerful collective group of people and a more powerful group of people, that more powerful group is going to try to take the resources from the smaller group. We see that all over. We see it with women, we see it with minorities, we see it with the white supremacists, and we need to turn that tide and push it back. When we get to particular policies, we need to protect Planned Parenthood. We need to support sex education in the schools. And we need to make sure that we're not assessing sales taxes on products that only one gender needs. We've got lots of things to do. Those are just a couple. I'm listening, and if you have any great ideas, please bring them to me.
Thank you, Jared. Kathleen?
As it turns out, I am a woman. So I had the wonderful opportunity to march in the Missoula Women's March this year. It was just a blast. And so I can tick off all kinds of things. We need to stop the war on Planned Parenthood. We need equal pay for equal work. We need affordable child care. We need to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. We're 2 states off. We need opportunities for women in business to start their own and be successful. We need paid family leave, whether you're raising a family or taking care of a loved one. I want you to know that I have been a strong voice in the Montana legislature for women's issues, for non-discrimination, standing up in front of 99 of my colleagues and falling on my sword for reproductive health, education in our schools, access to birth control, and the ability for cities to pass non-discrimination ordinances. And I will be a strong voice for those issues in Congress. And I'll tell you, it's been 101 years since Montana elected the first congresswoman in the entire United States, and it's about time she had a successor.
Thank you, Kathleen. John?
So I had the opportunity to march in the Women's March in Billings with my family. And for those that know me, I think you'd say that my strength is the strong woman that I'm surrounded by. And that starts with my wife, Megan, who's just my rock and gives me a lot of guidance, always in the right way. And it's when I go to work with my law partner, Colette, who's just an amazing, strong woman. And I watch, particularly with Colette in the legal world, you know, there's such disparity, and it's 2018. There's disparity with income. There's disparity with treatment. There's disparity with. I've seen the glass ceiling. It's real, and as we learn these stories after stories, and I mean, I've represented women that have been sexually harassed. I'm about to file a case right now on behalf of a woman that was sexually assaulted by a law enforcement officer. And so, you know, there's this power imbalance, and nowhere is the culture of corruption worse than in Congress, where scandal after scandal after scandal is coming to light, and we as taxpayers are footing the bill for these congressmen that act inappropriately. And so there's a culture of corruption that needs to come to an end. And in terms of what are things that you can do right away, women deserve equal pay for equal work. This is 2018. Are you kidding me? Paid family leave, and frankly, economic positions. You know, my espousing Medicare for all, my espousing a living wage, my espousing reshifting the balance back onto the taxpayer for public college. Those are all economic policies that overwhelmingly will benefit women and enable them to break through that glass ceiling and succeed and beyond.
Thank you, John. Grant?
I mentioned I was raised by a single mom. I have been marching behind a woman since I could walk. I was proud to march with my wife and my daughter, Fiona, who's 9 years old, at the Missoula Women's March. This is really personal for me. My dad walked out the door when I was 6 months old, and he never looked back. And strong women have defined my success in my life. The one that I'm raised by, the one that I'm married to, and the one that I'm now trying to raise. And I am proud to be in Montana, a place with incredibly strong women and a legacy of strong women. And I will do everything I can to make sure that women are empowered to exercise their rights, to have equal pay for equal work. I will absolutely defend a right to choose whatever health care you and your doctor decide you want, anytime for any service. And I will defend labor unions and call for whistleblower policies so that no woman feels unsafe in her workplace and everyone feels like they go to work and they are treated with respect and they have every opportunity to deliver the services and the abilities that they have. I want my daughter to grow up in the world where we are not having this conversation. And I do not believe for a second that we have to be women to talk about this. It is absolutely important that we have leaders who are men, who are white men, who acknowledge that we have incredible privilege and that we have a responsibility to use that privilege to create an equal opportunity for every human being in our country and in our state, period.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, that concludes all of our 2-minute answers. We're now back to the firing line here. And as I told you, I've got some questions here. Looks like I have 6 of them. They're written by somebody in the audience. I don't know who. I'm going to read them to you just the way they were written. And we'll just start with you, Grant, okay? Can you envision any scenario where you would support the use of nuclear weapons?
No.
Jared?
Maybe.
Kathleen?
No.
John?
No.
All right, Jared, you're up next. What is your approach to the constant and persistent attacks on a free press? This is kind of a tough one for a yes or no answer. Who handed me this question anyway, Hillary? Let's just say like a 1-sentence answer on this one, okay? I'll repeat the question. What is your approach to the constant and persistent attacks on a free press? At least a sentence. I'm going to use a little executive privilege here and say that you have a 1 minute to answer that, okay?
Our press is one of the safeguards of our nation, and we need to let them do their job and bring their truths to us. And we need to defend the First Amendment at all costs.
Thank you, Jared. Kathleen?
End it.
John?
Stop electing politicians that engage in violent rhetoric and that commit violence towards journalists.
Grant?
I think we need to recognize that the whole world is taking advantage of us right now and creating fake news, and they're creating division in our country at alarming rates, unbeknownst to most of us. We need to defend against that immediately. And we need people who will be elected to office and will show up and not only meet with the press, but the elected people. That's why I made a pledge to hold town hall meetings if I'm elected across the state of Montana. And I will never shy away from meeting with the press and answering their questions. And I am not afraid to say, I don't know. And I'm not afraid to say, I need more time to figure that out. But I will answer the press questions.
Thank you. Kathleen, are you ready? Do you support making student loans dischargeable in bankruptcy?
Discharge. I think so, if I know what that means. Yeah.
John?
Absolutely, it's a crisis.
Grant?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Okay, John? After Standing Rock, states are enacting laws to limit protests in order to protect, quote, critical infrastructure projects. Do you support or oppose?
The laws that would ban the protest.
That kind of a law.
I oppose any law that would restrict peaceful protest.
Grant?
Absolutely oppose.
Jared?
Protect the protests.
Okay.
Oppose the law like that.
Okay. All right, Grant? What do you believe is the single greatest threat to public lands?
Trump?
Jared?
Zinky.
Kathleen?
Thinky and industrialization.
John?
The Republican platform.
Okay, this is the last one, and the question is a little long, but bear with me here, okay? And we'll start with you, Jared. The question states, I am a 7th grader at Montfortin Middle School, and I am afraid every day that there will be a shooter. In this country, the Second Amendment is valid more than the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What is your plan to change that?
One word.
I'm going to exercise executive privilege here and say you ought to have at least a minute to answer that. Do you need it repeated?
I think I've got it.
Okay.
We need to do more. We need to figure out the most effective ways to protect our kids. They're our future, and they deserve to be able to go to school without fear and in safety.
Thank you. Kathleen?
As we discussed before, we need to place stronger restrictions on assault weapons. In the Colorado shooting, while the shooter stopped to reload, 9 kids ran by. Those 9 kids could have been dead if he wasn't waiting to reload. So we need to address assault weapons in our culture. Again, I am a gun owner, hunter, sportsman, and we don't need those kinds of weapons on our streets. We need our kids to be safe.
Thank you. John?
We need to elect representatives that will put our children and the safety of our children and the lives of our children ahead of gun lobbyists.
Thank you. Grant?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we need to work on right away is, I talked about the immediate changes we can make. I can't stress how important it is that we repeal the Dickey Amendment. This is an epidemic. It is a crisis. We have to understand why it is happening and how it is happening and develop sound solutions that we can take to our communities and deliver so that we know when we ask people to give up their gun rights, we will give them safer schools. We will give them kids who go to school and come home every single day. That is how we're going to get there. We're going to know that we can do it with confidence, and we can make the case to anyone, no matter how much they believe in their Second Amendment right, that this is the right thing to do for our children.
Thank you. All right, candidates, we're now at, it's going to be the last question for you. You're going to have 3 minutes to respond, and please use this 3 minutes to rebut another candidate's answer if you'd like, and highlight where you differ from your colleagues on the stage here, and what you think will make you the winning choice for Montana in November. And let's start with you, Grant.
Thank you. So, talked a little bit in the introduction about my work at working for land trusts in Montana. That work was about building relationships and building partnerships What I saw in that experience is what inspired me to run for this office. In Montana, we are incredible at looking past partisan divide in our communities, in our civic centers, in our churches, in our synagogues. We sit down at the table, we figure out what's happening in our communities, and we solve the problems together. When you live in Bozeman and you drive out into rural communities, you're not looking at every house wondering if that's somebody who disagrees on every issue. You admire them. I sat down with teams of people, farmers, ranchers, conservatives, liberals, environmentalists, and we found solutions to the issues that were challenging our communities. Right now, our entire country is suffering from a disbelief that we can cross the rural and urban divide. No place does that better than Montana. Our country needs that from us right now more than ever. We have foreign agents and foreign governments. We have a president, and I believe we have a congressman who are using every tool at their disposal to divide us. They are convincing us that we are enemies between parties, that we are enemies over issues, trying to convince us that we're enemies here in this room. The only thing that is going to be powerful enough to fight back is all of us together. So I believe as Democrats, we need to talk about the issues that transcend our divides. I believe things like our public lands are those issues. I think things like our public education that Greg Gianforte wants to undermine and remove funding from. I think that our healthcare system is something that is a struggle for people every day, and it doesn't matter if you live out on the farm and you need to get access to your rural healthcare system, or you're in town. Our social service and our safety net is disintegrating. People need to know that we care about their everyday issues. People need to know that we are in this together. And right now, I am the candidate who has demonstrated an ability to work across that divide, to bring people to the table, and to give them faith that their government will work for them again. I have done that working on the Farm Bill, taking farmers and ranchers and people who didn't believe in federal government anymore, and going to DC and changing our laws and changing the rules and changing the implementation of those right back to the ground so that people that thought that bureaucracy could never work for them believed in it again and told their friends about that. What we need is people who can cross this divide, bring us together, face and tackle real issues in our communities so that we believe in each other again, so that we believe in our institutions again, so that our children have opportunities again. When we do that, we will grow our party, we will grow our communities, and we will have a place for the next generation to still feel like and call Montana.
Thank you, Grant. Jared?
Who wants to beat Greg Gianforte in November? We need to make sure that we use strategy when we make our decisions. I didn't succeed at the United States Department of Justice because I had the best hair or because I was the tallest. I succeeded not because I saw 2 steps ahead or 3 steps ahead. I succeeded because I saw the end of the road and where I wanted to go. And I developed a plan to get there. So I want you all to work with me to develop a plan to beat Greg Gianforte. Because I want to be honest with you guys. The Democrats in Montana, we're not the best at picking people in primaries who beat Republicans in general elections. In seriously contested primaries, we haven't done that in 10 years. So we need to make sure that we pick the candidate who can beat Gianforte. And I can beat Gianforte. He's got 2 arguments going for him, and he brings them out all the time. I made a business worth $1.5 billion. I built jobs and grew jobs here in Montana. That's what he says. That's what he runs on. I have responses to both of those. I defended and saved taxpayers $1.5 billion just last year. And that's great that you grew jobs in the past. I have plans to build jobs and grow jobs in the future. With the wind in the trees, we can build jobs in Montana. We can expand and invest in your tomorrow to build Montana and move us forward. And that's how we beat Gianforte. We follow Bill Clinton's plan. He says, give them everything that they like about the guy they have, something they don't like about the guy they have, and give them something that they like about you that the guy they have doesn't have. I got all that. And if you think that there might be a couple of us who might be just as effective at beating Gianforte, I'm still gonna be able to advocate better on your behalf once one of us gets to DC. Because I've been to DC. I know how government works. I spent 9 years defending public lands and studying in detail how our public lands works. So when we look at how to modify it and how to protect it and how to negotiate over it, you can either, select one of these other people, wait 9 years, then they'll have the expertise I have. Or you can select me, and I can get started tomorrow. And we can make real progress for Montana and dig in the details and get things done, because I feel frustrated with government, and I think I've been hearing a lot of frustration. And we need to be able to destroy the barriers that are impeding our ability of change. So I hope you will vote for me, and I hope we can build this change together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Kathleen?
Thank you. So many of you know me. Many of you know my record. I've served Bozeman and Gallatin County in the legislature for 3 terms, 11, 13, and 15, and also the state as legislative staff back in the 90s, nonpartisan. I don't make promises I can't fulfill. I go and I roll up my sleeves, and I am grounded in what Montanans need, and I go and solve problems. So I am a conservation candidate. I have a 33-year career in natural resource planning and policy and environmental protection. We're going to put those 33 years to work in Congress, fighting for clean air, clean water. Isn't it incredible that we have the right to a clean and healthful environment? We're going to take that to Congress, and we're going to fight for that. In the legislature, I fought and succeeded in holding back really bad proposals. The Montana legislature in those 3 sessions was hyperpartisan, it was divisive, it was inexperienced. Let's look at Congress, hyperpartisan, divisive, inexperienced. We need someone that has been trained and been successful in that kind of environment to send them to Congress to do exactly the same thing for Montanans. I am a job creator. Passed bills in the legislature to create a new type of corporation that is very attractive to millennials. I was elected during the recession, so one of my big priorities was to help diversify our economy. I passed a bill that created 170 new businesses and over 2,000 new products, many from our agricultural sector, and that was just in 2 years. We need job creators to compete against Gianforte's claim that he's a job creator. I'm a healthcare candidate. I fought in the Montana legislature to reduce costs and increase accessibility for cancer patients, and won. It took me 4 years, but I stuck it out. I fought for decreased discrimination in the insurance market and to eliminate surprise medical bills. These are things that the experience of being in the Montana legislature gives me the knowledge to fight, the ability to succeed, the relationships built. Those are all critical to being successful in Congress. So what we need in a candidate is we need someone with a strong, progressive voting and advocacy record for all those things that we Democrats hold dear. We need someone who has been honored by the Chamber of Commerce for their work with business. We need someone who has excellent connections in the agricultural community. And we need someone who has policy success. I'm the only one standing up here that has won on policy issues in a divisive, hyperpartisan, dysfunctional environment. No diss to my legislative colleagues that are here. But that's what we need in Congress, and that's what's going to beat Gianforte, is that depth and breadth of experience, relationship, and knowledge. So it would be my honor to be your next Congresswoman. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. John?
all of us on this stage come with different backgrounds, and I'll share with you a little bit. My background and the experience that I bring to the table is I sit across from people like Louise, who, when she tries to get her insurance company to pay her husband's death benefits because her husband's been killed by a drunk driver, and they string her along for months and months and won't pay her, I have the privilege to sit across from Louise and say, that's not fair. I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to fight for you. I have the privilege to sit across from AB and Betty when they say, John, we did everything the bank told us to do, and now we're in foreclosure. Our house is going to get sold next month. And I have the privilege to sit across from AB and Betty and say, that's not fair. That's not right. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to fight for you. I had the privilege, even though we weren't all sitting across a table together, I had the privilege to represent every single person in this room and be your fighter and your advocate when dark money came into Montana, and I volunteered to represent the state of Montana. And I've taken on those fights, and I've won. And I've won by rolling up my sleeves, fighting hard, and saying losing is not an option, losing is not acceptable. And so I've stood up and fought and won against big banks, big insurance companies, dark money folks that tried to take over our state. And, you know, a lot of what I do is negotiate. And no one believes in negotiation more than I do. But when someone knocks on your door and says, hey, is it okay if I burn your house down? The right answer is not, well, how about you just burn down my garage? Or why don't you just set my car on fire? You say, get the hell off my property. These are dark times that we're in. Everything that we hold dear is under attack. Corporations and billionaires are grabbing the cookie and leaving us with the crumbs. And we're watching it on everything that matters to us. The education of our children, the health care, privatization of Social Security, the inability to pass common sense laws. It's all because Washington is broken and corrupt. And the lobbyists, the corporate insiders, they've got a champion right now in Greg Gianforte. Because the stuff that doesn't get on the front page, last week Greg Gianforte voted to undermine Montana's cap on payday lenders because 36% APR is not high enough for them. They'd rather get 3 and 4 and 500% APR. Those are the decisions that are getting made all the time right now in Washington with no oversight and everyone just doing what's best for corporations and lobbyists. You deserve a champion. I want to be your champion. I'm John Heenan. I need your vote. I need your support. Ours is a people-powered campaign, and together we're going to take back this seat. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That concludes our forum for the night, but before we end this, I'd like to just say a few words if I can. I've run a couple of statewide races myself. I've confronted dark money, and I know what it's like to throw yourself into the fray of a campaign, especially a statewide campaign. It's not easy, it's hard. It's hard on your family, it's hard on all the people that are around you. And I think we have had a wonderful privilege tonight to have these 4 shining candidates come and share with us their views on how they are going to, if they're lucky enough to be the candidate to run against Gianforte, to beat him and carry our message to United States Congress. And so I want you to join me in giving these 4 wonderful candidates a great round of applause. Thank you all very much.